The sun always seemed to smile upon Ituri, casting a golden glow over the village and filling the air with warmth and light. It was a place where the days were long and filled with the simple joys of life.
I felt it in the warmth on my skin as I helped my mother prepare fufu. The rhythmic motions of our hands, the familiar scent of the ingredients, and the comforting presence of my mother made these moments special.
Laughter, like the sweet melody of jungle birds, filled their small hut. It was a sound that echoed through the walls, a testament to the love and happiness that bound the family together.
My father would return soon from the fields, his calloused hands laden with mangoes. Each fruit was a symbol of his hard work and dedication, and we eagerly awaited his return every day.
Life was a lullaby sung by the wind rustling through the banana leaves. The gentle breeze carried with it the whispers of nature, a soothing backdrop to the daily rhythms of village life.
But one day, the wind changed its tune. It was as if the very air around us had shifted, carrying with it a sense of foreboding that we couldn't quite understand.
It carried a distant tremor, a disquiet in the air. The usual sounds of the village were replaced by an eerie stillness, a silence that spoke volumes. Whispers of strange men with guns spread through the village like wildfire. Fear began to creep into our hearts, and the once peaceful village was now shrouded in tension.
Fear etched itself onto my father's face. His eyes, usually filled with warmth and kindness, now reflected a deep worry that I had never seen before. He spoke of fleeing, of seeking refuge in the arms of the forest. The idea of leaving our home was terrifying, but the fear of staying was even greater.
But escape was a luxury not granted. The paths we once knew were now fraught with danger, and the forest that once seemed like a sanctuary now felt like a trap. The night arrived in a storm of violence. The tranquility of our village was shattered by the sounds of gunfire and the cries of our neighbors.
I awoke to screams piercing the darkness, to the acrid smell of burning thatch. The world I knew was engulfed in chaos, and the safety of our home was no more. My small hand trembled in my father's grasp as we ran, the night air heavy with the stench of fear and death. Each step we took was a desperate attempt to escape the nightmare that had descended upon us.
The world she knew, the lullaby of her childhood, had been silenced. The village that once echoed with laughter and song was now a ghostly shadow of its former self. In its place, a symphony of chaos played, conducted by the hand of war. The harmony of our lives was replaced by discord, and the future seemed uncertain and bleak. Flames devoured their hut. They danced with a terrible beauty, consuming everything Penny held dear.
"Run, my little bird, fly and never look back."
Her father pushed her towards the forest edge, his eyes reflecting the inferno.
I wanted to scream, to refuse to leave him behind, but his hand, rough and strong, propelled me into the darkness.
She stumbled over roots, thorns tearing at her skin. Behind her the night was a canvas of orange and black, punctuated by the staccato rhythm of gunshots.
Days blurred into nights, hunger gnawed at my belly, a constant companion to my terror.
The forest, once a source of comfort, became a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. She saw the ghosts of her village in the rustling leaves, heard their screams in the cries of startled birds.
Exhaustion finally claimed me. I collapsed beneath a towering baobab tree, its ancient roots offering a semblance of protection. Tears, hot and silent, streamed down my face. Alone, lost and hunted, I was a fragile bird with broken wings.
When consciousness returned, rough hands were upon her. The world around her was a blur, a chaotic mix of sounds and sensations. She could feel the roughness of the hands, the calluses scraping against her skin, and the smell of sweat and dirt filled her nostrils. It was a jarring return to reality, one that she wished she could escape from.
Panic seized me, the memories of that fiery night flooding back. The night when everything changed, when the world I knew was consumed by flames and screams. I could still hear the crackling of the fire, the desperate cries of my family, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness. It was a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from, a reality that was too cruel to accept. I struggled against my captors, their laughter echoing cruelly in the clearing. Their grip was unyielding, their strength far surpassing mine. I kicked and thrashed, but it was like fighting against a tidal wave. Their laughter was a constant reminder of my powerlessness, a cruel mockery of my desperate attempts to break free.
They spoke in a language she didn't understand, their words a torrent of threats and insults. The harsh sounds were like daggers, each one piercing her already fragile sense of security. She could see the malice in their eyes, the way they looked at her as if she were nothing more than an object, a prize to be claimed. They marched her for what felt like days, deeper into the heart of the forest. The terrain was unforgiving, the ground uneven and littered with roots and rocks. Each step was a struggle, her legs growing weaker with every passing hour. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees towering above like silent sentinels, watching her plight with indifference. The world became a tunnel of green, the air thick with the smell of decay. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant calls of animals, but it all felt like a cruel mockery of her situation. The beauty of the forest was lost on her, overshadowed by the fear and despair that gripped her heart.
Despair settled upon me like a shroud, extinguishing the last embers of hope. I felt like a ghost, a hollow shell of the person I once was. The weight of my situation pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. I wanted to cry, to scream, but I knew it would do no good. There was no one to hear me, no one to save me.
They arrived at a clearing, a chaotic sprawl of tents and weary-looking people. The camp was a hive of activity, people moving about with a sense of urgency and desperation. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and cooking fires. It was a place of suffering, a place where hope had long since been extinguished. This was their stronghold, a place where children like her were imprisoned, their innocence stolen by war. The sight of other children, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow, filled her with a sense of dread. They were like ghosts, shadows of their former selves, their spirits broken by the horrors they had witnessed. It was a fate she feared would soon be hers.
Fear, raw and primal, coiled in my stomach. It was a constant presence, a gnawing sensation that never went away. Every sound, every movement sent a jolt of terror through me. I felt like a cornered animal, trapped with no way out. The fear was suffocating, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. These were not men, but monsters wearing human skin. Their eyes were devoid of compassion, their faces twisted with cruelty. They took pleasure in the suffering of others, feeding off the fear and pain they caused. It was a chilling realization, one that made her blood run cold.
Her gaze fell upon the leader, a tall figure with eyes as cold and hard as obsidian. He stood apart from the others, his presence commanding and intimidating. There was an air of authority about him, a sense of power that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His eyes seemed to pierce through her, seeing into the depths of her soul.
He looked at me, not with the amusement of the others, but with a chilling indifference that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if I were nothing more than a piece of meat, an object to be used and discarded. His gaze was cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of empathy. It was a look that promised pain and suffering, a look that made me realize just how dire my situation was.
This was Kazi, the warlord they whispered about in fear. His name was spoken in hushed tones, a figure of legend and terror. He was a man who ruled with an iron fist, his cruelty and ruthlessness unmatched. The stories of his deeds were enough to make even the bravest of men tremble, and now she was at his mercy. This was the man who now held her life in his hands. Her fate was no longer her own, but his to decide. The realization was a crushing weight, a reminder of just how powerless she truly was. She could only hope that some semblance of mercy remained within him, though she knew it was a faint hope at best. Her life, her future, was now in the hands of a monster. Life in the camp was a brutal symphony of fear and hunger. Days were spent crushing stones, her small hands blistering and bleeding. The other children, hardened by their own suffering, offered little comfort. They were all broken birds, their wings clipped by the same storm. The camp was a place where innocence was a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of survival. Each day was a test of endurance, a battle against the elements and the cruelty of their captors. The children, once full of life and dreams, now moved like shadows, their spirits crushed under the weight of their circumstances.
Kazi was a constant presence, his gaze sweeping over us like a hawk. He ruled with an iron fist, meting out punishments with chilling detachment. His eyes, cold and calculating, missed nothing. Every infraction, no matter how small, was met with swift and often brutal retribution. The fear of his wrath kept us in line, but it also fueled a deep-seated resentment. We despised him, yet we were powerless to defy him. His authority was absolute. his word law. In the camp, Kazi was both judge and executioner, his decisions final and unchallenged.
Yet there were moments, fleeting and unexpected, when a different Kazi seemed to emerge. In those rare instances, his stern facade would crack, revealing a glimpse of humanity beneath. It was as if, for a brief moment, he remembered what it was like to be human, to feel compassion. These moments were few and far between, but they were enough to sow seeds of confusion and doubt. Was Kazi truly the monster we believed him to be? Or was there more to him than met the eye?
One day, as I struggled to lift a heavy bucket, he appeared beside me. I flinched, expecting a blow, but it never came. Instead, he took the bucket from me, his touch surprisingly gentle. It was a small act of kindness, but in the harsh environment of the camp, it felt monumental. For a moment, I saw a different side of Kazi, a side that was capable of empathy and understanding. It was a side that gave me hope, a hope that perhaps even in the darkest of places, there could be a glimmer of light.
Be strong. Never give up hope. These words echoed in my mind, a mantra that kept me going. In the face of adversity, it was easy to succumb to despair, but I clung to these words like a lifeline. They reminded me that no matter how dire the situation, there was always a reason to keep fighting, to keep believing in a better future.
He spoke to her in broken Swahili, the only language they shared, his voice gruff but not unkind. His words were simple, but they carried a weight of sincerity that was hard to ignore. In those moments it felt as though a bridge was being built between us, a bridge that transcended the barriers of language and circumstance. It was a fragile connection, but it was a connection nonetheless, and it gave me a sense of belonging, a sense that I was not entirely alone in this struggle.
His words, unexpected and rare, were like drops of water in a parched desert. They ignited a flicker of hope within me, a fragile flame I dared not let extinguish. In a place where hope was a scarce commodity, his words were a precious gift. They reminded me that even in the most barren of landscapes, life could find a way to thrive. It was a lesson in resilience, a lesson in the power of hope and the human spirit.
He remained an enigma, a man capable of both cruelty and compassion, his true nature shrouded in the fog of war. In the end, Kazi was a product of his environment, shaped by the same forces that had brought us to this place. He was a reminder that even in the darkest of times there could be moments of light, moments that gave us the strength to carry on. His duality was a reflection of the world we lived in, a world where good and evil were often intertwined, and where the line between the two was not always clear, not always